Welcome to the living room where we live, learn, and live together. I'm your host, Richard Martin, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today for another episode that we hope will be inspiring for you and your family, motivating for you and your friend circle, and altogether just a good time hanging in the living room. I thank you for your support, for sharing, for your feedback and your comments, letting us know how you've been encouraged, how you've been uplifted. This is our hope and our mission, and we're going to continue to grow together. I am extremely excited to have one of my coaches, one of my mentors, a person who has helped me in tremendous ways. And before I introduce him by name, I just want to give you a sense of where he's coming from and some of the accomplishments that he has. Our guest today in the living room is a 25-time, that's right, I didn't stutter. No, I did not make a mistake. 25-time Ironman and long course finisher. His finish lines include Wisconsin, South Africa, Western Australia, Coeur d'Alene, Louisville, Canada, Malaysia, Los Cabos, Chattanooga. He told me before we started, brother, don't feel like you need to read all those. So I'll let you do some research after the show to do more work on it. But since 2002, our guest has been a national and international endurance triathlete. He is not only a participant in endurance events, but he is a coach. Since 2004, he has coached men and women across several finish lines. He's also a sub 3-hour marathoner and has competed in numerous running events from 5Ks all the way to ultra marathons, including the 110th Boston Marathon and the historic and coveted Comrades Marathon. This brother specializes in form and technique, and I have benefited from his expertise. Without further ado, without any more formal words, I'm excited to welcome my coach, Brother Lloyd Henry, to the living room. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, Richard?
Oh, man.
Thanks for the invite.
Not a problem at all. Thank you for accepting. My parents taught me not to be stingy with the people that bless you. So I said, man, I was introduced by way of somebody else who had said, listen, if you want to cross a finish line, there is one person that you need to come in contact with. Your name was mentioned. They gave me your number, and I haven't regretted it since. How you been, man? What's been going on with you?
I'm good. I'm glad they gave you my number so that we could get you because, they were all concerned.
Yes.
When they gave me the heads up, like, hey, so-and-so might be calling you. Several people called on your behalf, putting in requests and favors. Like, look, so-and-so is a friend of mine. You got to make sure he gets it done.
Yes, indeed.
My family called like, oh, that's my boy from school.
And I remember they said, if you want to cross the finish line, well, you need to call Lloyd Henry. And I said, okay. And I waited several weeks, maybe over a month or two. And then I called you and I was like, listen, I'm planning to do this marathon. And you said, man, how many miles have you run so far in training? And I think I said, I got about 5 miles. And you were like, that's all?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, who's playing a bad trick on you? Like, who convinced you to do this in such a short window? I mean, I even tried to talk you out of it a couple times. Like, you sure you want to do it this year? I mean, we can figure something out, but you were like, nope. I said I was going to do it. I'm a man of my word. I've got to do it. So I was like, all right, fine. Let's figure out a plan to actually get you there, in the limited amount of time we actually had so that you do it safely, because you had a lot of ideas and, picked up bad information along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Had you followed those, it would have been pretty. So, yeah, I'm glad we got connected in time for us to, get you to that first finish line well.
Oh, man, it was a transformative experience, not only physically, but as you mentioned, mentally. I had a lot of my own conjured up ideas about what it meant to be a marathoner. But we'll get into some of those things as we go along.
All right.
Brother, you were born and raised in St. Croix. What was that like? What was life growing up in that beautiful place?
Oh man, St. Croix is beautiful. It's America's paradise. So we're a territory of the U.S. So we have all the privileges of being American citizens, but we also have beaches and tropical living. So you get all the West Indian culture that you could want, plus U.S. citizenship, which is great as well. So it's the best of all worlds.
Sure. And how long did you live there before coming stateside?
I grew up in St. Croix, born and raised. When it was time for school, that's when I kind of came to the States. Did the last few years of high school in the U.S. before going on to college. Everybody usually leaves the island and heads to the States somewhere. If you want to go to school, you kind of get a little bit of a rock fever.
Sure.
Living on an island, you just feel like you gotta, expand your wings and get off the island.
Sure. Sure.
So a lot of us, come to the States and go abroad to go for school, and that's exactly what I did.
Okay. So you studied biology undergrad. After that, you ended up finishing a master's degree in business administration and a master's degree in medical science. So growing up, what were some of your professional goals, occupational goals? What did you see yourself doing as indicated by what you studied?
Yeah, so, my folks said, like, you go to school to learn and then get a degree, and most people won't actually be in the profession that they actually went to school for. And growing up, that never made sense. I was like, well, why would you study something and not end up doing it, until I became an adult and realized, like, yeah, what you thought you were good at 18, 19, and 20, years later, you may find that you're better at something else. So, I think I considered all the traditional fields, doctor, lawyer, all of those things. I was always good at science. So when I went to school, that's what I studied because I was good at it. It made sense. So I went down that path, did the whole research kind of a thing, clinical research, bench research, that was fun. And as I grew older, other interests popped in your head, like, I've always liked business. So what would that look like? How do you start a business, run a business? So, then you went to business school to learn.
Sure. Okay. So at what point in that journey or after your academic journey are endurance sports introduced to your world, to your life? And when it was introduced, was it just like, this is crazy, I don't know what y'all thinking? Because I know I had that mentality. I'd heard of marathons. I'd heard of even 5Ks, 10Ks. What was it like for you? At what point does it come onto your radar?
So endurance sports were never, ever, well, sports in general were never on my radar. I mean, to this day, my close friends, family, they're still amused at the fact that I make a living, in a sports-related endeavor. I mean, anyone who knows me, it's still a running joke. Like, no one can process that because it's just so far afield from, where I was. Because, I was really not into sports per se, just a little bit of fun, no running, biking, all that kind of stuff. It's not until after grad school, I'm settled into everyday living, working, and I'm just, the normal life. I end up getting out of shape, which is normal,
right,
because you're working. And you don't really have a barometer as to what in shape should be. My college view was, okay, can you pick up a pickup game of basketball every couple of weeks? Yes. Can you hit the gym and lift a couple of weights for a set or two? Yes. But that's pretty much the extent of, what I think of athletics.
Sure.
It's not until I was hanging out with one of my sisters where, I'm the youngest of five. So all of my siblings are older. They have kids, and I'm always the fun uncle who takes the kids out when we get together and, have a great time. I take them, we play,
Right.
and that was just, good time with Uncle Lloyd. But what I didn't realize was every time I took the kids out to play, I would wear them out. Like, I had so much energy because I was younger.
Right.
So I'd wear them out, bring them back to my siblings, and literally they'd, be ready for dinner or a nap, and, that'd be it. But this one time, I brought my nieces back from, our play date, and they were still wired and excited. And my sister was like, "What's going on? You're so out of shape. You can't even play with the kids anymore." so, that led to a little bit of a heated debate because, we were all out of shape, but
Right.
I was the youngest. So it was like, you're too young to be this out of shape. I mean, where I'm living in DC and I couldn't even run and catch the metro. Like every time I'd run and catch the bus, I'd miss it. It was starting to be a problem. So the conversation with my sister started into, well, why don't you get into shape? In St. Croix, we've had a triathlon for years.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was always coming around every year, and we just looked at it and laughed at, the crazy folks who come and do this strange thing of swimming, biking and running. And my sister ended up saying, well, I bet you couldn't do that.
Okay.
I was like, what? You're daring me to do this? She was like, yeah, I double dog dare you. I was like, oh man, you going to the double dog? So of course I was like, sure, I'll do it. I'll sign up and go do it. I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. So, I came back to DC, looked it up, like, okay, what's actually involved in a triathlon? I mean, like, what specifically? I know it's 3 sports, but what exactly? How far do I have to go? And, that's what kind of got me started, just by my sister daring me to get in shape to do my first triathlon, and then getting ready for it. And then everything just kind of snowballed into more.
So did you feel yourself? Did you feel like you were out of shape? Did you tell?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, there was no like disguising it or hiding it. I mean, I knew I was out of shape when, like I said, I couldn't, you couldn't jog to the metro. The metro is like half a mile away. You couldn't jog there. You're just, yeah, it was no secret that I was out of shape. Like I could tell, you could feel it. You were sluggish, climbing the stairs, you were winded, basic chores that you shouldn't be feeling like they're labor intensive. You start to be like, wow, I'm sweating coming up these stairs.
Right. So for those who might be new to this, there are 4 different lengths of triathlons. There's sprint, Olympic, half, and full, right?
Correct.
Which one are you doing for the first time?
First time I'm doing the sprint.
Okay.
I had the good sense. I had the good sense to do the sprint as my first.
Okay. How long is each event?
So the sprint varies depending on what race you sign up for, but generally speaking, you're talking about anywhere from a 300 to 1,000 yard swim, anywhere from 10 to 18 mile bike ride, and usually a 5K run.
Okay.
When you move up to the Olympic distance, that's when it starts to get standard. You're going to have a 1 mile swim, 25 mile bike ride, and a 10K run.
Okay.
Then when you get really into it and you're feeling yourself like, okay, let's really have fun, you move up into the mid distance or the half Ironman distance, which is a 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike ride, and then a half marathon, 13.1. And then for some of us who just love laughs and giggles, we step it up one more to, the Ironman or the long course distance, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a 26.2 marathon at the end.
Oh yeah, laughs and giggles all day, I'm sure.
All day. I spend my day in the office laughing and giggling.
Yes, indeed. So was it fun? You finished in
I finished. Yeah,
Florida?
I mean, it was a blast. I mean, I came home. I had to learn how to swim properly. I mean, growing up in the islands, I could swim. We go to the beach and you could swim and have fun, but most of us don't do, organized swim, like lap swimming in a pool or anything like that to know how far you could swim. So, I can point to something and say, yes, I can swim over there. But if you said, all right, now give me, 500 yards, I'd be like, well, how far is that? I don't know
Right.
what. But yeah, so I came home, trained here in DC, got ready for it. I borrowed a bike because I didn't own a bike. So I borrowed my cousin's bike. She's 5'2", so the bike was, not perfectly fitted for me, but it's what I had. So
Right.
I did the race. I got out of the swim and pretty much wanted to have a party in transition because I thought that was pretty much the end of the race. I was like so excited to finish the swim.
Right.
But kept on with the bike ride, did the run, and crossed the finish line. And that was the first time I got like a athletic award, medal, anything like that for athletics. So it was, a great time. We threw a party at the house for everybody. Like, hey, look, I just finished a triathlon. Yeah.
So it's so interesting, right? Because I'm more familiar with you. Our relationship is more on the athletic side. So even hearing that in your family, in your close friend circle, those who knew Lloyd win, it is still like, who would have ever thought? So at this point in the early 2000s, what your family's seeing, what you're seeing is like the academician has entered the athletic world. You've just had this great feat. So you have a kind of an academic background. Well, everyone does, but yours is like, I'm smart. I'm kind of the bookie, biology, med science, MBA. That's fine. Does that apply now to this new space? In other words, are you researching what to do by yourself, or do you bring mentors in, coaches in? How do you approach growing from this first introduction to now, I want to get better at this?
So I think it's back then it was a smaller knit community. Well, let me rephrase. There are more of us now doing the sport of triathlon than when I first started.
Okay.
So when I first started, any race you went to, there'd be, maybe one other person who looked like me at an event. And when you'd meet that person and their family, you guys became fast friends because it was like, while you're racing, your family and their family were, the only ones like you hanging out for the whole day while their athletes were racing. So in those early days, anyone who looked like us, you get to know, and you guys would then stay in contact and share information. Okay. Like, because, back then, I had dial-up internet at home and only, high-speed internet in the office. There's limited research you could do on company time. So, right. So, and there's a lot of information on the internet, but you just didn't know what was right, what was wrong. There are lots of books out there at the time, so you kind of read through different approaches and still try to figure out, what applies to you, what's good information. So, that science background came in with, researching and ciphering out what applies to me and what doesn't, where I'm at as an athlete versus the person they're describing in the book or, in the article, and picking out the useful information that would benefit me at that time. So that's really how it went. There weren't too many mentors or folks doing too much stuff. So it was really more of a peer-to-peer kind of a thing. We were all figuring it out together, and you just didn't know that many people who did triathlon until you got to an event. It was kind of like, oh, you'd see someone swimming, but you didn't know they were doing a tri.
Right.
Or you'd see runners. Runners were popular, but, you didn't know who was doing a triathlon. And every group I'd join, run group or cycling group, I'd be the only person who's talking about triathlon. Everyone was kind of focused on just their sport versus triathlon. So it took a little time to compile enough information to make it useful.
So you kind of get in, really, as you mentioned, dial up at home, high speed at work. So this is before a lot of the tech platforms, social media platforms. There are no hashtags at this time. You can just say
No.
hashtag triathlon, hashtag try life, and you're exposed to the world of triathletes. So you make a decision maybe a couple of years after you are introduced to now broaden your horizons. You've been a participant, and you now say, I want to help other people. I want to start coaching. I want to start training. My assumption is between your introduction and that point, you had a few more events under your belt, and you found through your own research and your peer circle some techniques, some things that work for you. So it's a kind of two-part question. What were the techniques that you found that helped you? And then what was it that inspired you to say, I want to start coaching, which, as we'll get to, ultimately leads to you now, this is what you do. You make a living doing this.
So it really started with me trying to be a better athlete for myself. That's where everything kind of started from. After I got in and I realized I enjoyed it, it then became a question, okay, yes, I made it through that swim, but that was by pure will and hard-headedness, not 1 ounce of skill or technique. So, if you're going to ever do this again, you better learn how to properly swim. When I started to run and increase the mileage, it was just like, man, I'm getting banged up every time I go out for a long run. It's like I got hit by a train on a Saturday and a Sunday, and it takes me till Wednesday to recover. And now you're telling me I've got to go back on Saturday or Sunday and do this again. This cannot be the recipe for a healthy lifestyle. So once I realized that, I started trying to figure out, what's the right techniques. And my peer circle introduced me for swimming, they introduced me to Total Immersion by Terry Laughlin. And that really transformed everything for me, for my swim game. So I got taught how to do it for myself as an athlete. And I was like, look, now that I know it for myself, I want to learn how to do it for other people. Because, from my thought, if I can explain it to somebody else, then that means I know it well enough for myself. And that's always been my bar. How well do I know something is if I can explain it to someone else, then I know it well enough for myself. So I did that for the swim, and the same thing for the run. When I started to look at run form and run technique, initially I was just looking at the faster guys in the run club, and inevitably every season a different guy was injured, and it was like, okay, let me not follow what he's doing because that didn't work for him. Even though he's faster than me, there's no longevity to this. And then someone introduced me to Chi Running by Danny Dreyer, which was all about biomechanics, form, technique, body posture. And once I figured it out for myself, I went to Danny and was like, all right, I need you to teach me so I can explain it to anyone else. That way I know for myself. But I never had any intentions of teaching anyone. It was really just, I need to learn it well enough to teach someone so that I know it. Once I started to apply the techniques as an athlete, I felt the difference, but I didn't realize that other people noticed the difference as well. Case in point, for the run, for example, I did my first couple marathons. I had decent times, but I showed up. I went and did the Philadelphia Marathon one year, and I crushed it. I had a great time. It was amazing. I think it was like I think I qualified for Boston that year, so I was excited. I drove back to my sister's house, got back to her place. I was gonna do the ice bath and everything like that, and I was like literally dying in the tub. And my sister is like really scared because she's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" She's on the phone with my mom, like, "Your son's about to die in my tub. I don't know what he did." And I'm like, I was that broken from the race, but I had a good time. on the clock. Fast forward, I went and learned the chi running technique, applied it, figured it out, and then I went back and did the same Philly race. I think the following year or the year after, and blew my time out the water. Walked into the house, took my shower. My sister saw me and she was like, "Weren't you supposed to run the Philly Marathon today?" I was like, "Yeah, I did. I'm back. There's my medal." And she was like, "Okay, whatever it is that you just learned how to do, you're going to take me outside and you're going to teach me that exact same technique. Because last year you were about to die in my basement, and this year you don't even look like you ran a race. So clearly it's working, and after you eat, you're going to come and show me how to do this."
Wow.
That's when I realized, like, okay, it is a noticeable difference. And the same holds true for the swim game. So once I figured it out for myself, and close friends and family started to ask me, like, "Okay, we've noticed how you were half dead at all these other events. We were embarrassed to be out there cheering for you because you look so like you were struggling compared to everyone else. Now you actually look like an athlete, like all the other boys and girls out here playing." They were like, "Show us what you're doing." And, they were the first people I started to teach. And once I started to teach them the techniques, they told their friends, they told a friend, until finally someone I didn't know said, "I'm friends with so-and-so person, and they said, you can show me how to do X, Y, and Z." And I was like, "And I'll pay you." And I was like, "Okay, sure. You're going to pay me to do this?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And that was kind of like the first time I said, "All right, let me charge a person for, helping them figure this out." And that was the beginning of it all. And once I had my first client who trusted me to get them, through their event, that kind of blossomed into more. More people, referrals, calling, saying, "Hey, can you help me with this, that, and the other?" And then me committing to actually, turning it into a business versus, just a hobby on the weekends or here or there.
So, wow, somebody comes to you and says, "Yo, teach me your ways," basically. I now want to be a Lloyd Henry disciple. So for those who aren't familiar with chi running, total immersion, swimming, these are energy efficient and injury-free techniques. The whole idea is to be able to create a sustainable experience so that you're not, like you said, getting hit by a train every time you run. You don't feel like, "I'm never getting in water again," after you're done with the swim. So now you're helping people. And is it right after that you say, let me establish this formally as a business? Or how long after people start to come by way of word of mouth do you say, "This is what I need to do"?
It took several years. I started off because, I had ideas, but it never, endurance spurs weren't necessarily a big market per se, or at least I didn't know it was a big market at the time. So it took a few years of just coaching, people, friends, families, and a friend here or there, before it started to actually, generate revenue, where it was just like, oh, I'm starting to make as much money on the weekend as I do with my 9 to 5. And it was like, when that started, become a reality, it was like, if I'm doing this part-time, maybe I should consider doing it full-time, because I can invest more of my time and focus on doing it, because, people call you at different hours and it's like, well, no, I'm not available during that time. I'm at work. So it took a few years to grow the business, and then say, okay, you know what, I'm going to just do this full-time and commit to it. But it was a process. It was definitely a process that took a little bit of time. But once I figured out I wanted to do it, I did form a company and, create a have someone create a website and those kind of things just to put it out, even though, even though I was still doing it just on the weekends, it was still like, okay, well, how is someone going to find me outside of word of mouth? So I did take some steps to formalize it and form a company and present that to the world. Like, okay, if you're ever looking for me and you didn't know me through a friend, you could find me on the World Wide Web, as we called it then.
So I'm confident that people will want to find you. So let's not wait till the end. What is your company and where can it be found?
Sure. My company is OnPoint Fitness. You can find me at onpointfitness.com. I'm on Instagram as OnPoint Fitness Coach. And what's the other one? I think I'm on Twitter too as OnPoint Fitness as well. Good.
OnPoint. Help us out with that. How did you settle upon the name OnPoint? It makes sense to me.
But yeah, it was interesting. I had no idea what to name a company. So I put together a panel of friends and started to brainstorm ideas of, what kind of names, would work. OnPoint is a name some of my friends referred to me back in college before it became an actual, big term that's used every day now. So 25 plus years ago, I had some friends who, that's what they refer to me as, like, yeah, Lloyd, OnPoint. And, so I threw that name in the mix of naming it. It sounded better than Henry Fitness.
Right. I mean, I think Henry Fitness might still, catch on, especially if the proof is in the product. But
right. But again, sometimes you've gotta, your strengths, and I believe that sometimes you gotta reach out to other people and get feedback. So I put a list of names together and of all variations of swimming, triathlon, running, and that's what we settled on.
Okay. So this is early 2000s, moving into mid 2000s. You now established the business. I want to go back again to the philosophy you shared, that one of my litmus tests, one of my measurements for how well I know something and can apply it to myself is whether or not I have the tools, the insight, the wisdom to share it with someone else, to teach it. And I love it. I don't think I knew this, but initially that wasn't necessarily your end game to do it. This was just saying, if I can learn it to teach it, then I know it. But hey, it was a great endeavor, because you end up learning it to teach it and you teach it. So over these past, now you're heading towards 2 decades of teaching and training and coaching. Man, what have been some of the transformational experiences you've been able to be a part of for other people? And that can be, Rich, man, this person couldn't do anything. I'll leave it to you to share. And it doesn't have to be one. It can be a number of stories. What are some transformation stories you've been a part of?
So I think, taking you out of the mix for this conversation, since you're the host. Right?
Yes, take me out.
I'll leave you out and let you tell your own story.
Okay.
Right. So excluding you, I think for me, some of my highlights have been being able to pull off some things that I thought were just, I had to really think hard of how to pull them off. So I know we used to have a local race, a women's only race called Iron Girl here locally. And, I usually get a few calls leading into the race, with folks needing help. And I remember one year, in the early years, someone called me and we had, I want to say we had about 3 weeks before race day. Mm-hmm. And she needed to learn how to swim 1,000 yards for this race. And she really couldn't swim at all. I mean, she could kind of make it to the other end of the pool, and that was it. And she was like, look, I need to get this done. And I was like, I don't currently have a format. Normally I meet you once a week, maybe twice a week, but she was like, look, whatever it takes, I'm willing to put the time in. Just tell me where to be, when to be, and let's get it done. So in about 3 weeks, we met probably 3 or 4 days a week. And we were able to pull a swim stroke together that got her through the Iron Girl race in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
So when I saw her jump in the water and come out, because she was a strong cyclist, strong runner, so those weren't even part of the discussion. So it was like coming up with a plan and then executing it was probably one of my early highlights, where I was like, wow, we just did that from non-swimmer to finish line in 3 weeks. We even she'd never been in open water either. So I remember asking a friend who lived in Annapolis, like, okay, can we come out to your house and use your kayaks and, get in the water so that she could get some open water experience. So, that was one of the early ones where it was just, not really a realistic end game, but figured it out. The other one I like, I've had a couple athletes who want to do the full distance. Mm-hmm. They want to do the full Ironman distance. And, with varying issues. And, then we just got to figure out how do you map that plan out to kind of get them there, whether it's, a limited training schedule or, family commitments or, they travel a lot. So that's another one that I really, really enjoy. And of course, working with you when you call and was like, can you get me ready in this short period of time?
Yeah.
Those are the ones I think that I always, they always challenge me and always worry me. So once I give my full disclaimer, like, this is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. You should probably not move forward. But if you're going to do it anyway, here's how we're going to get it done.
Yeah. For those of you, just kind of a trailer, I guess, for my marathon episode. The marathon was October of 2016. I was confirmed as a participant in March. So you've got several months. I called Lloyd like days before August. So let's just put that in perspective. Between March and August, your boy had peaked out at like 5 miles. The marathon is 26.2 miles. So literally the first conversation, he says, why is that all that you've done? And I just been trying to go it alone. I didn't know anything about it. And we met down at the office in DC, and I'll never forget, kind of slowly but surely, I just had no clue. So you remember the first mile, I was like, we got to walk. We have to walk. But even before that, just teaching me like, okay, you have to learn to run, which was a foreign concept to me. Like, I know how to run. It's like, no. You know how to run to play basketball. You know how to run on the football field. But this is a different monster. You're going to burn out trying to sprint everywhere you go and deconstructing. So I share just that tidbit of my story because I did experience literally like transformation. I remember you being very clear, like, hey, man, we can push this off till next year. But if you really want to go for it, it's going to be no less than this amount of time on your feet per week. We're going to have to see each other. Like, just this is what it's going to be. So I'm sure not everyone is like the 2 stories you mentioned where people are coming to you and saying, I need to get this done, help me. Not like me, like, yo, I'm behind, I'll get there. Perhaps you've had the opposite where people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. They're not cooperating with the plan. They're just kind of lax about it. How have you as a coach, because it requires great flexibility, how have you responded, interacted with the clientele that were little abrasive, little challenging? Maybe they thought they knew more than they thought they knew. How do you kind of finally get them to say, okay, here's where we need to go and you need to get on program?
Well, I think I have, what's the way to say it? I have a way of being, brutally and completely honest.
Okay.
And in my profession, I think that's a plus. So, mm-hmm. I still have a good bedside manner, mm-hmm. And will communicate. But I think when you're hiring a coach to work with you, they've got to be honest. And being honest doesn't mean I'm not going to let you accomplish your dream or I'm raining on your parade. It's just letting you know clearly what's involved in your dream actually coming true. You know, a lot of times with athletes, we have misperceptions of the work that's involved in achieving our goal. We see the end result and we're like, this is where I want to go. And, you know, the person in my office does it and, you know, he doesn't look like an athlete. So I'm pretty sure I can do it too. And we all kind of falsely size people up in the athletic area without really knowing what the engine inside looks like. So I really spend time communicating like, you know, we can do this, but here's what you need to know. And you just have to make choices. You know, if you know if you have all the information as an adult, you can make an informed decision. And, you know, that's all I can ask you to do. A lot of times we make decisions without having proper information. Wow. So I think for those clients who are, you know, have their own outside information or want to do it, you know, again, we're all adults and, you know, we all define fun in different ways. So if you want to suffer and that's your definition of fun, you know, far be it for me to stop you. But I'm just going to explain to you as clear as I can, apples to apples, orange to oranges. You know, if you go down this path, here's what to expect. And you may say, you know what, that's fine. That's what I want. And I'll let you go down that path. But at least you knew what you were getting into, you know? So even with training plans, some athletes will, you know, they want to train tons of hours, you know, and they just think like, well, that's the only way we're going to get it done. I read this on the internet, so I've got to do this much. Or my friends are on this particular training plan, so I want to do that. And it's like, well, if you were to do that, you're probably going to get injured or you're going to burn out in 2 weeks because the volume is just too much for you. So, you know, it's really just about communicating, letting people have as much information as possible so they can make an informed, clear decision as to what's going to happen, and they're not taken by surprise by it.
One day we were running in DC, and I benefited from that approach to coaching. It was like 96 degrees outside, and we were in Haynes Point. All the DC folk will know where that is. And I just stopped, and I was like, it's hot. I'm having a horrible day. And you were like, yo, calm down. It's 96 degrees outside. I don't care who you are. Today is not going to be your best day.
Right.
And I said, you know, that makes a lot of sense. But it was both. It did calm me down, but it also helped me to really grab onto this idea that, yo, when you're talking about coming out here, it's not just putting one leg in front of the other. You've got elements around you. You've got to factor in. There was another day where we were running, same location, and like this slew of bikes came by and almost blew me off the road. And I was like, you know, oh, I'm sorry. You were like, no, you don't apologize. Like this is your road. If they want to be crazy and knock you off the road. And so even that was like, there's so much that you'll never be able to control. So don't measure each day like this has to be my best run. So I feel you in terms of being that coach who tells people brutally, honestly, this is what you need to know. And you never gave me all information at once. Like,
yeah, you can only process so much information, and the rest is kind of wasted.
Yeah.
So, you know, you gotta give folks as much as they can handle, as much as they can digest, they can process, you know, and a little extra so that it can just kind of chew on it a little bit. And, you know, weeks later, months later, you'll tell them something and be like, yeah, you've told me this before, haven't you?
Yeah.
You know, but only now is it finally making sense. I know you've said this over and over and over again, but, you know, now it's clicking because, you know, the other layers, the other building blocks, the other issues have been resolved, and now everything comes full circle, and you know, that little piece fits. And it makes sense. But just like with that run we did, managing your expectations, you know, if it was a beautiful day and you had a bad run, then we may have thought it was a form. We may have, you know, thought it was some significant issue. and that's what you were kind of running through in your head, like, all the things that are going wrong, when in fact it's 96 degrees. So if you run outside when it's 96, here's certain expectations. And once you realize this is what happens, then it's not like, oh man, something bad is going on. It's like, no, this is what I expect to happen at 96. So your brain and everything just processes the information differently when it's like, that's normal. Nothing's technically wrong here. It's just, what to expect.
Sure. So let's now bring the listeners back to, we've talked a bit about you as coach, you as trainer, you as entrepreneur in this field. Let's come back and kind of get with you now as participant in endurance sports. I mentioned just a few of the places where you've run, where you've swam, where you've biked. I mean, the international experience is admirable. And just kind of to open it up, and you can come at it for as long or as short as you want to, man, what have been some of your best days, quote unquote, in the office, out there, swimming, biking, running, anywhere in the world? And then also flip it, and what have been some of your worst days or scariest days? And you can talk about it leading up to these events, like I lost my shoes, I found out I brought the wrong size. It can be during, a shark was on my feet, Go ahead, man. Best days, worst days.
Oh man. Yeah, it's funny. I've got so many stories. And my imagination is so crazy. Like every time I race, it's like a movie going on in my head as I'm racing, that I'm laughing or suffering, in real time, thinking like, man, this is going to be funny sometime later when I'm not actually experiencing it. But let me see. For me, I enjoy the suffering. I enjoy, that's part of the fun for me. So the crazier the day, it seems the more fun and the better I do. Don't ask me why, don't ask me how. But when the elements and everything is crazy, it just seems like I have a good day and a good time. I think one that comes to mind was we went to Switzerland for Ironman Switzerland a couple years back, and that race had every weather condition known to man on one day. It was the most bizarre thing I think anyone has ever seen. So we had rain, we had sleet, we had hail, we had a heat wave. The temperature dropped. It was the most bizarre thing. So we rode up into the mountains, so it was freezing cold. And then coming down the mountainside, there's sleet coming, so that's hitting you. Small little size hail. But through it, it was like this. No one is gonna believe me when I tell them, I'm getting hit by hail like that. It's like, what is that? You just hear it clicking on your helmet, and you're like, this is unreal. And then an hour later, it was steaming hot, where you're just like, I just want to take all my clothes off because it's so burning hot. So I like events with challenges. That's kind of like the ones I go for. Another great event I had was in Lanzarote, the Canary Islands. It is considered the toughest Ironman course in the world. It was on my radar for a long time. And I finally decided to go and do it. And this one, it's one of the few races left that has a mass swim start. So for those who don't know, in triathlon, we used to start all races where everybody started at the same time. And over the years, they've progressed, and now they do a time trial or waves where, 5 or 6 people start at the same time, or a group of 20 people in the same age group would go off together. You don't really find mass starts anymore because they're, a little dangerous, to say the least. So Lanzarote is one of the few places that still had a mass start. So if you think about 2,500 of your closest friends who are all triple type A personalities who all want to be in the front, whether they need to be in the front or not. As a swimmer, everybody wants to be in the front and they're jockeying for position. So the gun goes off and 2,000 of you are running and charging the water at the exact same time, literally duking it out for positioning in the water. You get in and you swim, and it looks like one of those piranha attacks where the water is just bubbling because it's just a frenzy, and you're in the mix, and people always say, well, don't you get kicked and hit? Yeah, you do. That's probably why they moved over to time trials and waves. But the Europeans are extremely aggressive on the swim compared to U.S. swimmers. Mm-hmm. So it was a bloodbath out there, man. It was a battle royale with 2,000 of my friends who I didn't know, just going at it for 2.4 miles in the water. But when you got out, it was like, whew, I survived that. It was just a washing machine. Everybody got spit out. You finished the swim. The bike course for Lanzarote is just famously hot and hilly. Mm-hmm. So you're climbing and it's just big hills over and over. You just don't have enough gears on your bike. You want to get off and walk, but it's 112 miles. You can't walk, so you're just suffering through the sun, and it's just blazing on you. No trees or nothing to give you coverage. So one of the craziest things. Some races, when they talk about being hard, are windy. Mm-hmm. That'd be one defining, like, hey, it's a really windy course like Ironman Maryland or Kona. They're windy. And other races are hilly. Like Wisconsin is hilly. Right. But Lanzarote is hilly and windy. So you're climbing a hill with the wind. So you really just suffer. And then, of course, the run isn't a picnic either. But I went, did that one. It was so much fun crossing the finish line. They make it so that each one of you, when you cross the finish line, you break your own tape on the finish line. So you actually feel like a star as you come across the finish line, because you're breaking the tape for as you come across the line. And it was crazy because I'm a amply melanated person, to say the least. And when I did Lanzarote, I was about 4 or 5 shades darker, with full tan lines. So when I took off my kit that day, I had, a clear demarcation of where my tri-suit ended, where my shorts ended, and I was like, wow, I've never ever seen, I'm like, it's got to really be hot for me to get that much of a tan. But again, that a hard course like that is what I find fun. I had the opportunity to also race Kona, which is everybody's like every triathlete's dream race. And that was exciting. I think that's the only race that I've ever done where, how do I describe it? The wind was so bad, I was coming down a hill and pedaling, and I couldn't break 10 miles an hour. So it was, how do you pedal down a hill, but you still can't break double digits? But that's Kona. The wind was so strong coming at you that, you're trying just to stay upright on your bike. You see people get literally blown off of their bikes as a crosswind comes on the course and just pushes them over, and you're like holding on to the handlebars, hoping that you don't get blown over yourself. But it's a great course, though. I definitely encourage anyone to do it.
I know for me that Kona is definitely a dream. And it's probably because I've heard you mention it and because I've probably seen one too many YouTube recaps of Kona. But I respect the struggle. You mentioned something that I'm sure made people raise their eyebrows. You enjoy the suffering. It's something that helps the experience for you. So in terms of the inevitable suffering that is triathlon, swimming, biking, running, from a mental standpoint, what are you doing? What are you saying to yourself to get through? Are you kind of an athlete who spaces out completely? I get into this zone. Are you kind of a, 99 bottles of Sprite on the wall the whole way? Are you listening to music on the bike, on the run, books, podcasts? Or are you just like, no, I need to hear the water. I need to hear the road as the wheels are spinning. I need to hear my feet hit the ground. What's your approach to staying mentally in game? That's A. But then B, just so you can have full range, B is people might hear the bio, 25-time finisher, that's just long distances. Man, has there ever been a time where you had to call it in? Like, I can't finish today, the circumstances are rough, and, we'll come back another time. So you can hodgepodge that however you want to, man.
Okay. So for me, so let's clarify. By the time you show up for a race day is just the icing on the cake. The race day event is not, anything but your victory lap. So by the time I get to a race, I'm just actually enjoying the fruits of months and months of hard work that now I'm just getting to see this new destination, a new route, a new course, things I've never seen before, and just enjoying all the hard work that I put in up to that point. All right, so that's what I mean when I say I just kind of enjoy the suffering, because it's something new and something different. But during training is when all the hard work went in to make it actually happen. So that's really the key thing there. As far as pulling up short, I think, well, I've had one DNF where did not finish, and that was a race that I did down in Brazil, my very first race, where it just didn't go according to plan. Despite my best efforts, the swim just kind of took me out. The water was too cold for me. The buoys weren't properly anchored down, so I just kind of kept swimming, trying to chase a buoy that wasn't stopping until I finally caught it. But by then, most of the time on the clock had passed. So, that was just, beyond my control, and it was what it was. But moving on to, something that was within my control, I think my most recent, I guess, biggest epic fail would have been my attempt at a 100-mile ultra. That was probably, that's my most recent big, where I just had to tap out, like, it's not going to happen. Ultras are were new to me, or are new to me. So it's a big learning curve. Mm-hmm. And when I started to train for it, I went based on thinking of it as a regular run, or like something I've done before, even though it's something totally different. Right. So I went, by the time I called a friend of mine and said, who's a professional at it, and was like, hey, I'm about to do this 100-miler, such and such. He was like, he gave me the same speech that I've given, hundreds of other people. Like, I wouldn't advise this, but if you're going to do it, at minimum, here's what you need to do. So he gave me some tips, but I think I had maybe about 3 or 4 weeks left before the race to prepare. But I got out of this 100 miles, I got 60 under my belt before I had to just tap out. Yeah. I just mentally wasn't ready for all the unknowns that came with the event. I mean, just let's be honest. I just was not ready. Sure. There's no sugarcoating I mean, the race people, were so nice that they helped me so much. I showed up to the expo with a couple bags, and everyone looked at me like, "Are you here for this race? Like, are you sure?" And they were like, "Look, you need to go to the store." They kidded me out with like, "Here's what you need, how you set up a transition for ultra. This is not a triathlon. We're not laying things out on a little blanket or a towel." So that kind of was different, where mentally I just I gave it my best, but after 40, 50 miles, I just kind of tapped out. Had a technical difficulty. I had two watches, one to keep time and let me know. I had a backup watch. By the time I went to get my backup watch, it wasn't properly charged. So I did 20 miles in the unknown without knowing, how fast I was going, how far I had gone. And I'm in the middle of nowhere, running in the dark, and like I said, I've got a vivid imagination. So everything I heard coming in the woods, I swear something was coming after me. So my brain played so many tricks on me in that 20 miles that by the time I got, to the aid station for the checkpoint, I had defeated myself. I had taught myself so much negative energy that I was like, I'm dead, I'm done. And, everyone was like, "You're doing great, They was like, "You're crushing it." I was like, no. They was like, why don't you just sit here for an hour, recover, and then go out again? I was like, nope. I can't go back out there. Not going to happen. I know my limits. Like, that was a wrap. So, I knew that. But for me, I usually use my training time as, just personal therapy. So I use that. I solve all my problems when I'm out on a run or on a bike during training. So, I'll just gnaw on it for a couple hours while I'm on a long run. I usually don't listen to music or anything like that. I just kind of, work through ideas, brainstorm, things like that. And then on the race day, a couple 100 Sprite bottles on the wall. Yeah. I always encourage people to, learn the words to some of their favorite songs so that you actually know all the words, because you'll get on a long ride or a long run and you just want to zone out and kind of, hum a melody or something to just kind of get in the zone. So for me, I usually get, I settle into a zone and, just kind of focus in, and that's when things are going well. Mm-hmm. But in endurance sports, when you're talking about, you're out there for, 12 to 17 hours, you just kind of, you have to have like a fail-safe bag of tricks of like, okay, when it gets really bad, what's my go-to move? Yeah. I laugh because, back in the day, I used to sing the songs from Sesame Street during my Ironman races. So I'd be rolling through on a 20-mile run or something, and I'd be singing the Cookie Monster song or the counting how many runners, one runner down, two runners down, things like that, just to keep amused, because you have to find, what makes you happy when you're doing it so that it's enjoyable, versus, just being, suffering and being miserable.
Shout out to Sesame Street. It has stood the test of time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Helping people get through endurance sports. You mentioned something that I think is very profound, and that is having multiple options when you're on the course, places to tap into to keep yourself motivated, encouraged. I think it is very therapeutic. I've experienced that myself. And you really can kind of get into a deep space. I mean, finding corners of your mind where in my profession as a pastor, sermons are developed while I'm out there. I mean, I'm thinking about Bible stories and little pockets open up. You're like, man, I never thought about that. Or ideas come. Now, there is this term that you remember I mentioned it to you early on in our time together, and you kind of had to talk me off the ledge. And I don't think you even addressed it right away. You just said, yeah, knowing that I didn't need to even entertain that at the time. And that is the infamous wall. W-A-L-L, the wall. I mean, that was like in every blog that I had read, every video I watched, they were talking about the wall, the wall. So for those who don't know, share with us, what is the wall? And you can be brief with it if you would like. And then for you, if you've ever encountered a wall or your fair share of them, how does one get through that or beyond that when they're biking, swimming, running?
So traditionally, you hear about the wall in the marathon world a lot, and that usually comes somewhere between miles 18 to 22. It is that point where you've covered enough ground, but you still have a little ways to go, and your brain and your body just kind of figuratively hit a wall where you just can't take one more step. It's like your brain has checked out and left the building, and it's like, you can't do anything more. You just want to curl up into fetal position and just sit down. And there's different theories of whether it's, your glucose, your nutrition, what's shutting down, or the brain, has had enough. So, you're just kind of running to that spot where you can't go anymore. And yes, I mean, if you've done enough endurance sports, you're going to hit that wall in training and on race day. I think what you need to know about the wall is nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing bad about it. It's just a reality. You may hit the wall, and knowing that it's not the end of the world, you can kind of take a moment, regroup, and start again. The other thing is being prepared. Mm-hmm. A lot of times some folks just aren't prepared enough. So you run into that wall often because you take your training up to a certain point and that's it. And usually it's whatever your long run was, is that unknown of, can I keep going beyond what I've trained? So you trained up to 20 miles on your run, and you hit that on race day, and it's like, can I even go further than this? I've never gone, this uncharted territory. Like, what's going to happen at my next step? So, when it comes to that, it's really, really having some go-to positive thoughts, remembering your why. Why did you sign up for this event? What motivates you? What's encouraging you? And tapping into that really helps get you over some really dark places, some steep hurdles that you're going to encounter when facing that wall. And the more practice you get, you start to see the signs of the wall coming. So you can say, okay, I've got to stay on top of my nutrition. I've got to stay on top of my hydration. I have to have, some more positive feedback throughout the run. Mm-hmm. I have to pace myself better. I can't get too excited early in the race and go hard and fast because I'm going to run out of steam later. So you just have to start to think and plan and have some, precautions in place and steps in place to kind of help you get through that wall. But even if you do hit the wall, you're among friends. Lots of people have been there. Lots of people are going to be there in the future. So it's not the end.
Sure. So I don't imagine that your every waking and resting moment is centered around endurance sports. At some point, as much as this is a thrill of your life and it's as beneficial as it is because now it's a part of your livelihood, man, are there any other creative things or just stuff you do when I'm not running, when I'm not biking, when I'm not swimming, or helping someone else bike, swim, run? What is Lloyd Henry doing? What are some things you're in, man, that you just kind of want to share with us?
Oh man, so I've got a lot of side hobbies because once triathlon became work, it wasn't as much as my go-to only hobby. Before it was my hobby, so that's all I did. But then when it became work, I had to find some other things to do. So let's see. I started gardening a couple years ago. I started a little backyard garden, and that went well. So I had fun with it. And then I decided not to tear up my entire lawn for a bigger garden, and relocated to a community garden where I spend my time with my tiller and my weed whacker and planting all kind of vegetables and fruits and stuff like that. Getting into the dirt, which I find really therapeutic. Just getting dirty when you're got a desk job kind of thing. You don't really get dirty like that, so it's good to get in the dirt, and that's been fun. Let's see. I've also done or do basket weaving. Okay. Yeah, I know. But the interesting thing is my aunt taught me how to basket weave, and it's a specific market basket unique to St. Croix called the Crucian market basket. So my aunt taught me how to do that. So I've done that now with I've got plenty of spare time when we're going through the quarantine. So I pulled that out and started to do more of the Crucian market baskets since it's a family passed down tradition. So my siblings and I, we started to do those more and more and be creative with them with the color palettes, and even started a Facebook page for it and things like that. So yeah, basket weaving is pretty fun. Kind of therapeutic, monotonous, but different.
Sure. And it's interesting because both gardening and basket weaving have technique and form. So
I can't get away from it.
It's all good. So, and we'll post these. We'll post some links in the show notes, everyone, so that if you kind of want to see some of Lloyd's work and support, or even learn, you'll be able to access him and his family there. Going back to family, man, you said earlier you're the youngest of 5,
right?
Big boy, and kind of just maybe trying to connect some dots. Looking back, they say hindsight is 20/20, or at least it's hindsight has better vision. Based on what you're doing now, do you see any roots in your family space, in your upbringing that said, looking forward, I would have never forecast this, but looking backwards, some stuff makes sense. My parents did this for us. My sisters were always doing this. I always had an interest here. Or is it still like, nah, there's no connect? What do you think?
I mean, I can make a connection.
Not forcing it.
So the only clear connection that I can say is I'm from a family of educators. So my parents, my aunts, uncles, everybody, even though they may have a different job title, they all were educators in some capacity in their discipline. And I would extend that as me as a coach, as an educator, just happens to be in athletics. So, I'm teaching a lot of athletes how to do things with form, technique, on that side. So, that would be the only stretch where, the discipline that I can't find a connection with the athletics at all. but from the concept of, being able to teach and explain, break complex ideas into simple form, and explain them to just about anybody with different ways so that each person understands, in a way that works for them. That there's definitely a family connection for that.
Okay. So, man, when you're going out on your triathlon events, whether in the States, abroad, who's coming with you? Who are you bringing with you? And, is their presence like just comforting? I'm glad these people are with me, or is it like functional as well? I need you to be at this point, at this time, to give me some water, some goo, energy gel, who's coming with you?
So it has transformed a little bit over the years. So different people serve different roles, and it depends on the trip. So for example, my parents are all, they always come, but they're only going to come to an international race of a place they've never been before.
Okay.
So I'm racing in the U.S. My old man isn't really interested in hanging out in a local city. When I say let's go to South Africa, he's like, I've got a ticket. Call me for that. Other friends aren't interested in traveling internationally. If I'm doing something local, they'll be like, yep, sign me up. I'll be there. And usually I'm going to have one friend there, so that when I get out of the water, they can text my mom to let her know that I got out to swim if I was doing a local U.S. race.
Okay.
So after that first incident where, I didn't finish the swim, my mom, she always sleeps better knowing that, like, I'm back on ground. Mm-hmm. So if she's not at a race, is the responsibility of one of the people in my crew to, send her a text message, drop her a line, and be like, all right, he's out of the swim, he's on the run, or he's on the bike and moving forward. But most of my trips really are, racecations. It's like I turn them all into some sort of vacation for my family and my friends. So I pick a location that I think will be fun and nice to see. Mm-hmm. And whoever was interested in seeing that spot, it'll be like, okay, we're going to go on that trip. And my crowd is pretty laid back. I don't really need anything on the run or, out there. So yeah, no, I'm pretty low maintenance. The only thing that they request is that I don't take all day, Back in the day, and that comes back to my training. Sometimes I take a passive approach to my training. Sure. Other times I take a more aggressive approach. So usually, depending on who's going on the trip, they're like, okay, are you going to be out there? Are we going to be there till midnight waiting for you at the finish line? Or are you going to come, when the sun is still up?
Right.
So, that kind of dictates how much I train, to see who's going to go on the trip.
So you mentioned the season of quarantine and social distancing that we've been in at the time of this recording, the year 2020. 2020 used to always be like one of the sci-fi movie dates, and here we are. It's like, no, real talk. It feels like a sci-fi movie. And one of the casualties of the pandemic has been, virtually every endurance sport has just been canceled in terms of like a formalized, organized event. People are still running, biking indoors, outdoors, and stuff like that, but everything's virtually canceled for the most part. So for you, man, how have you, from a personal standpoint, just in terms of you maybe having had some things on the calendar, and then also from a professional standpoint, how have you been able to stay grounded, find a level of peace? Was it initially like, oh my gosh, my life is falling apart? Or, where are you now?
So I think for me, it was always, we'll see what the next couple of weeks look like, because it was always a little bit more information coming in, and, races weren't really canceling, far in advance. It was like, we'll see, this is going to pass. So athletes were still training because their event was still going to take place. Sure. So I think for the initial first parts, athletes and everyone, as you're coaching, you're still moving with the belief that your race was still going to happen, and you continue to kind of work through that. It's only recently that the reality has set in, like, even if you have a race on the calendar, there's a good chance that it's going to be canceled down the road. So that has to shift everyone's thinking as to, how do I prepare? How do I train? What do I do? For me, I was lucky that I got an early season race done before the shutdown. And once I finished that race and I came back, we went to Thailand. So we saw how they were handling the situation in Thailand, and it was an eye opener. And when we came home, we realized that, okay, we're not going to do exactly what they did, so we're going to really get hit with that. So I think I had a little bit of a foresight, foreknowledge of how it was going to go down. So as an athlete, I pretty much transitioned from a race mode to a off-season mode where, I started, dial back. I was ramping up for all my marathons and Ironman races that was going to come in April, May, June. I just kind of decided like, yep, I'm going to dial back, on the intensity and on the volume, switch over to some other things to, not have that big letdown thinking that it was going to happen. And then, you're frustrated that it doesn't.
Sure.
And now for, many of my athletes now who've kind of come to that realization, or their races later on in the season are starting to go. I think a lot of it was trying to do just online work. When you switch over from a race specific agenda to more of a how do I build my base for next year? Here's the plans that I have for next year. What should I be doing now to maximize this good time to get ready for that? So a lot of my athletes, that's kind of where we've directed the conversation to go. But, the in-person things, the group workouts, all of those things, not sure when those are going to, come back from a business perspective. But I think more people with the technology are going towards virtual coaching or, setting up calls, video analysis. So, going out, taking, some footage of you running and send it to me for me to analyze and give you some feedback, or a couple of laps in the pool for me to analyze and tell you, okay, here's what I want you to do to fix this, that, and the other based on what issues I see, compared to you able to come to the pool and us have a one-on-one session like we used to. So I think more people are taking advantage of that versus before. Before it's like, yep, I'm going to just come and do some swim lessons or a run class. Now it's like, okay, I'm going to take a picture at my pool, send it to you, you analyze it and get back to me.
Sure. Well, I got a few more questions for you. The first would be, you organize races, you've organized events before. Is there right now on your heart, in your mind, a dream event that you want to organize? And if so, what is it? Is it a 5K? Is it a marathon? Is it a tri? Is it an ultra? And where is it? Is it in St. Croix back home? Hometown boys coming back. We're about to do it big. Is it somewhere else in the world? And then the B part of that, in terms of participating, is there yet on your dream list, man, Rich, this is going to be like the Everest for me. I'm going to get here. I'm going to do that. What's on the horizon for you in terms of what you want to participate in?
As far as organizing, I don't know if I have a dream event I want to organize. And that's just because the way things are going, I'm not sure when things will get back to what you could do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not clear on what things are going to look like on the other end. Cool. So it's like I need more time to see how things are going to pan out, so you can start to even envision what something great would look like, and like you said, 2020 is that sci-fi kind of movie. So, my brain just can't even process, process that one as far as organizing. Cool. As far as racing, that's one of the things I'm still struggling with. I created a list years ago, and I've checked off everything on my list.
Okay.
So now I'm pretty much asking friends, what are you doing? and I might come and join you on the event that you're doing because, okay. I didn't know, like, for example, the world majors. There's six marathons around the globe that are part of that. I never realized that before when I was doing, lots of marathons at a time. But a friend of mine told me that she's done it, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I might add that to my list. Marathons on 7 continents. It's like I've done a few continents, but I never considered, hitting them all. I mean, that was my goal when it came to Ironman, was to do one on every continent that had one, which I did. So once I checked that off, I never, I thought that was the biggest thing I could think of. There's a couple events I wouldn't mind doing now that I've talked to a few more people. I saw a friend of mine recently did the rim to rim at the Grand Canyon. You start on one side, run over to the other, and then come back. So he did that earlier this summer, and I was like, that sounds like could be fun. Cool. You and I have talked. I've done the Comrades in South Africa, and I survived it. So it's been enough years now from that trauma that I've said, like, I wouldn't mind trying it again and seeing if I can do it, a little faster this time. But I'm not sure. But for me, I think my big ones are trying to move into like ultras. I think that's going to be my next, thing that I want to chase. It's totally outside my comfort zone. So, the thought of just being on your feet for 24 to 36 hours and just going, running at night in the woods, on trails, it just sounds crazy enough to be fun. So I know there's some major, like the Badwater Ultra or Western Regionals 100, where you have to qualify to get into that event. So I think big events like that would probably are going to pique my interest of, where I want to go next. But otherwise, I'm just taking like suggestions from friends, like, what are you doing? And I may join you.
Sure. So you mentioned you've done a triathlon, full Ironman on every continent where they exist. And I feel like that was historic for you.
Yeah, I think so. As far as we can, I think I'm the first African American to do that. When I did it, I think there were 5 other people around the world who'd done the same thing. So yeah, it's just a handful of people who've done one on every continent so far.
Yes, sir. Excuse me, folk, if I just take a moment to bracket this pride. My coach is the first African American to run an Ironman, full Ironman on all continents where it exists. If you feel like you can compete with that, then you can write us and challenge it. But for the purposes of the Living Room podcast, now let me get off my boastful horse. Man, congratulations. That is major. In all honesty and in all sincerity, man, I know I'm not the only one who can say that we are proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and thankful to your sister. I'm not sure which sister it was, but who said, brother, you're getting out of shape. Go swim, go bike, go run. And I'm sure that no one really saw just what that would open up to. And here you are. A final few questions just as we close. There might be some who feel as though for a brother who is involved in this arena, endurance sports, that your diet, man, must be a struggle. Like you're just not eating anything that tastes good. You're drinking water all the time. Man, help us with the diet piece. Is that a myth, or man, are you eating things that taste good to you?
All right. So in full candor, let me just say that nutrition is as simple or as complicated as you choose to make it.
Mm-hmm.
You do not need to change anything at the onset of your athletic journey. You simply need to start being, active, and your nutrition will follow. Mm-hmm. All right. Don't put the cart before the horse. Just start exercising, start getting out there, doing that, and your nutritional needs and interests are going to naturally change as required. But if you try to force yourself to, change your nutrition ahead of the activities, you may find it to be a bit of a struggle. So with that being said, no, I don't follow any strict anything like that. I eat what I want. I tell folks, you probably want to do as I say, not as I do, as it comes towards nutrition, because no, I like to eat whatever tastes good. And I go from there. There's a time and a place for everything. So, when I'm in my off-season mode, I'm in off-season mode. When I'm, training for an event, I let my activities dictate, because, when you go out for a workout, if you eat junk, you're going to feel it on that physical activity, on that run, that bike. You're just going to feel it. And you're going to quickly choose to do better. Whatever better is, you're going to choose to do a little bit better on your nutrition so that that next workout feels better. You're not going to want to suffer through another bad workout. So you're going to, your body's going to tell you what it needs. Do you need more protein? Do you need more carbs? Do you need more water, vegetables? Your body's going to kind of lead you into what you need when you start to exercise a little bit more, and just kind of follow that naturally. And then, when my racing season is over, my diet restrictions also are over as well. Personally, I have the French fry standard personally.
Yes, sir.
I know that when my body no longer is able to process French fries, I know I'm ready for a race. So when I start to exercise and train, if I can still eat French fries and they still taste good and work for me, I know I'm going to suffer through that race.
Okay.
If leading into my training, I go and I get some French fries and my body is like, this is a bad choice for you, my friend, then I stop eating fries. Not because they don't taste good, but my body is like, this is not going to fuel you for the work that you're doing. So I don't really force myself to stop eating it. It's just, it no longer works for me. So, that's how I approach my nutrition, versus I have to be on a strict plan that requires X, Y, and Z as I go. So I encourage people, don't overcomplicate something. Your body's going to kind of tell you, kind of what you need and what's not going to work for you as you start to exercise, and just listen. Sometimes, we're hard-headed and we just don't listen. They're like, well, I'm going to keep eating it anyway, even though it makes me feel terrible. Well, that's your choice. But, the smart move is, if you realize like, hey, that just doesn't sit well anymore, cut it out. Cut it out the diet, when it's no longer working for you. But if it still works for you and you can still get up and do those activities, go for it.
Sure. I learned my lesson my first marathon season, and I think my diet had been complimentary of the work we were doing for the most part. But in between training runs, I think miles 15 and 17, so it was about a week and a half, 2-week difference between them, we went to Bermuda. And, while I was there, family's cooking everything, drinking everything. I was like, I can't let this can of ginger beer just sit here. I got to have a little bit of this. And man, I came back, and upon returning, it was the 17-mile run. And boy, I suffered through that thing hard. And it was a clear indicator that, yeah, man, this stuff is adding nothing of value to you right now. You're 17 miles into this training experience. You're almost to the marathon event. hold off on the chips and everything just a little bit longer.
Right. I mean, me telling you, hey, when you go down on vacation, don't eat that. You might not have had a good time. It may have been worth it. I don't know. But that lesson of, realizing for yourself and, you're not going to forget that. You just know, hey, you know what? When you're not training for a marathon, you probably can sip a little extra of that ginger ale, and it'd be great. But when you got a 17 miler the next day, it's like, that just didn't help. Yeah. So you kind of learn that as an athlete, but you didn't have to, as you notice, you didn't have to change necessarily your whole nutrition plan or your whole lifestyle. You just kind of take note of what fuels you and what doesn't. And I think, that's one of the big problems I see a lot of new athletes experiencing. They want to do everything too fast, too soon, because they saw it, versus just letting it naturally take its course and gradually making changes versus all or nothing.
Sure. Well, man, this is our final question, and it's kind of our customary send-off question here in the living room, and it's this. If you can send a text message to yourself 10 years into the future, you can send a text message to the you 10 years from now, what does it say?
Did you ever learn moderation?
Wow. Woo, I guess we'll have to wait 10 years to see what the you would respond to that question. And maybe you can write that down in a journal, tuck it away somewhere, and go back and say, did you ever learn moderation? I love it. My brother, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you indulging us and just bringing us into your world. As I said before, huge kudos to you on all that you've been able to accomplish. And the half has not been told about what others have accomplished, but I wanted to just say thank you, my brother. This is, you're connected to each one of these medals, and any future medal that I have, you'll always be connected to it because the technique and form is with me. And I mean that whenever anybody asks me, how'd you get into this? Your name is always a part of it. And I appreciate you. And I'm grateful that you've been willing to come and just sit in the living room. And I hope that going forward, after we get past all this, we'll be back out there on the training course. You'll be able to help and sow into others as well. Folk, for those who have been tracking with us, you've been in the living room with our special guest, Brother Lloyd Henry. You can find him on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Please visit his website. Give us your website one more time.
OnPointFitness.com.
OnPointFitness.com. If you are interested, even if you're interested about being interested, you're not there yet. You're just saying, maybe I want to just read a little bit, look at some pictures, be inspired. Follow him. I highly recommend. I know by personal experience, our spheres of influence and our circle of friends intersect, but then they also are separate. I know that he is able to get you across the finish line with a smile, as injury-free as possible, using energy in an efficient way, and it's just going to be fun. You don't have to be in the DC area. You can be anywhere around the world, plugging into OnPoint Fitness and reaping the benefits. And who knows? You just never know. Right now, you might be on a couch metaphorically, or you might be on a couch literally, and you just want to start off with learning to walk better and further and longer, introducing yourself to a 5K, or it might be a non-traditional introduction to endurance sports. Maybe you're just going to go for, as our guest did, hey, I just started off with the sprint triathlon. The pathways there might vary, but it can be done. Health is wealth, and that's what we want to prioritize today. I thank you each and all for joining us in the living room, where we listen that we might learn so that we might live. Until next time, I'm your host, Richard Martin. Thank you to our special guest, Lloyd Henry. We'll see you next time.